Yes, indeedy, folks. It's the Beer Drinker's Guide to the Great Wahoo. Of who you and the Great Wahoo. Well, folks, this is the 9th episode of Pooh, You, and the Great Wahoo. And I can hear some of you sighing with relief. It is our last. In past episodes, we've looked at the rivers running underneath our feet. There's the potable water that comes to our sinks. There's the street runoff into storm drains. And there are the mountain runoff streams that we put into pipes and run underneath the street. We also looked at the 500 miles of pipes that are the Boise City sewer system. Over the last 6 weeks, we've been going out to the West Boise wastewater treatment facility and taking a good look at how we actually do process sewage so that in 24 hours it is cleaned up for the river in processes that would take nature several months to accomplish. We looked at the headworks building where the influent first enters the plant. We then followed the water out to the primary clarifiers where most of the solids are separated from the water and most of the floatables, like grease, are also taken out of the water. We followed these solids and floatables out to the biosolids processing center where they are treated for about 28 days and turned into fertilizer for a farm south of Boise. We then went back and went from the primary clarifiers, following the water to the aeration basins. We saw that in the aeration basins, a great deal of air is pumped into this water, and that encourages microbes to sit and eat on all of the little tiny parts of microsolids that have gotten through the system. After we fatten those microorganisms up real good, we put them to secondary clarifiers where they sink to the bottom and we take them out of the water. The water that goes out of the secondary clarifiers is really very nice clear water. But it still needs to be sterilized so that the remaining microorganisms do not reproduce in the river. For that reason, we send the water to the ultraviolet building, where it is run by thousands of ultraviolet bulbs, which sterilize the microbes. Having seen how we process sewage, today we're going to look at the most fun building of all. We're going to look at the Boise WaterShed. This building houses the offices for the wastewater treatment facilities in Boise, and it houses the Boise WaterShed. Boise WaterShed is the educational arm of the Boise Public Works Department. As you can tell by its name, Boise WaterShed is concerned with much more than just what goes on at the West Boise wastewater treatment plant. This is a fun educational environment where we learn everything about the Boise WaterShed, starting from how our mountains were made, to where our water comes from, to the land that gathers the water up for us, and the Boise River system, our reservoirs that hold the water back, the canals, and the irrigated farmland. And, yes, Boise WaterShed does talk about our sewer system and how we keep this precious water clean. Here at Boise WaterShed, you'll get to meet Cindy Bush, Environmental Education Coordinator for the Boise Public Works Department, and Tom Boughton, Education Specialist for the Public Works Department. Tom is the gentleman who's been good enough to show us around the wastewater treatment plant. Tom and Cindy are both fun-loving folks. Talking with Cindy about the rather bizarre field that she covers, she made a point of showing me a few of the little gadgets and knickknacks that folks have shown her and given her over the years. This handy desk organizer has a magnet at the bottom of the gentleman sitting on the pot, so when you lift him up, the paper clips are readily handy. Just as handy as the paper clips and the Scotch tape is the poo pen. The first thing that you notice at the WaterShed building is the large concrete pipe. As we've said, this is the size of the sewer pipe that gathers the water into the sewer treatment plants. There are 8 of these large pipes carrying rivers of wastewater under our feet. 3 of them go to the Lander Street plant and 5 to the West Boise facility. The first thing you notice when you enter the WaterShed building is a large glass mural honoring our beautiful Boise River and the watershed that it gives for our community. Everything in this building is delightfully kitschy and reminiscent of a sewer plant. Like most of the fixtures in this building, this drinking fountain is made from cast-off sewer pipes and machinery. Even the wash basins in the men's and ladies' rooms remind us of where we are at. This gentleman here is made up of cans that were collected along the Boise River. Fortunately, the hand chair next to him is waiting should he become a little weary. The WaterShed building has rooms with projectors for educational classes, and it has a large area where you can meander around and look into the processes of our water at your own pace. Yes, Boise WaterShed does look at wastewater and how we treat it. However, that is just one part of the entire WaterShed story. There are demonstrations of how water is cycled. There are demonstrations of old equipment. This Sludge Master from about 1950 is a heavy-duty pump that was used to keep the sludge moving through the Lander Street plant. There is this handy little house that gives us great hints on how to use water wisely and how to save water. I found it surprisingly educational. I'm sure kids enjoy how interactive it is, pushing buttons on the panels and listening to the noises and seeing the lights that the buttons cause to carry on. And throughout the display room, there are interpretive videos that tell you the story of our precious water. The folks at the Boise WaterShed want us to remember that we should not treat our water like a trash pile. It is much more expensive to separate garbage out at the sewer treatment plant than it is to simply put it in the waste where it belongs in the first place. Also, we have gotten good at separating solids and many different items from our water. However, in today's world, our water is under assault from many dissolved chemicals that are so small they are extremely difficult and expensive to remove. Pesticides, chemicals, unused medications, and other items that people flush down the drain are causing a major catastrophe to our waterways. Because of high concentrations of phosphorus in the Snake River in the Hells Canyon area, within a few years we are going to have to be removing 96 to 98% of the phosphorus that goes from this plant into the river. Phosphorus is about 5% of the solid mass in primary sludge. It's very common. We can save buying expensive equipment, and we can help keep our sewer rates down by buying dishwashing liquids and detergents that are phosphate-free. It really will help. Another disaster in the making that people who are professionals in this field are becoming increasingly concerned about is our use of medications. The fact is, 90% of what we consume in medications go through our body and into the sewer system. Even worse, people flush unused medications and pills down the toilet. We are beginning to see mutations in fish and other aquatic life that are being traced back to these medications that get washed into the river. One of the things that we are noticing are large amounts of hormones in some rivers because of hormone supplements that people take. Those rivers now have fish that show both male and female traits as well as other mutations. In Boise, we get 20% of our drinking water directly from the river. Many communities depend on rivers for much larger than 20% of their water supply. We want to remember that even the 80% of the water that we get from wells, the water has come through the ground from the river. So it is imperative for our own health, as well as the health of wildlife, that we remove these chemicals from the water. The single most important thing we can do is to not put them in the water in the first place. All communities now have free hazardous waste disposal. The contact number for hazardous waste disposal is easily available in your telephone book or by using a search engine with your city's name and hazardous waste disposal on the internet. In Boise, this program is provided by the Public Works Department. For information on this free program, call 384-3901. The information is also easily available by Googling Boise hazardous waste, or, for that matter, just Boise waste. Old paint, medicine, and chemicals of all kinds are taken care of by taking them to our hazardous waste disposal sites. One thing that hazardous waste disposal sites do not take are controlled medications like narcotics. Boise is one of many cities nationwide working to have these narcotics taken back by the pharmaceutical industry for reprocessing. For now, the proper way to dispose of these medications is to crush the pills or open up the capsules, mix the content with some dirt, sand, cat litter, or something similar, put the product in a glass jar and tighten the lid real good, and then put the jar in with your regular trash. Medical and household chemicals are extremely small and extremely difficult to remove from water. They are also extremely expensive to go after. These medications and other chemicals that come from our everyday life are now called emerging contaminants. They are emerging into our consciousness as something that we may have to look at and make sure that we do not dump into our rivers. One of the emerging contaminants is antibacterial soap. This antibacterial soap affects the way that the bacteria in the digesters at the plant work, and it gets into the river. It's also been proven that antibacterial soaps never kill all the bacteria. They only kill the easy bacteria, which your body uses to build up immunities. The really bad bacteria stick around and make your sink or your shower into a breeding ground for really heavy-duty bugs. Except in the most extreme circumstances, perhaps in hospitals, we would all do ourselves a favor to never use any cleaning agent that has the word antibacterial on the label. Another thing we learn at the Boise WaterShed Education Center is how lucky we are to have modern sewage treatment facilities. A full 90% of all the sewage in the world is not treated at all. It is dumped directly into rivers and oceans. As we have already seen, just 1 ounce of poo, a nicely rounded tablespoon, has a phenomenal number of microorganisms. Fortunately for us, this contamination is whisked away in a river underground called our sewer system. It is no wonder that these rivers called sewers are also known as sanitation systems. As I said, we are so lucky to enjoy having a good sanitation system. Worldwide, if you took 10 people, 4 of them, a full 40% of the people in the world, almost half, have no access to a latrine, no access to a toilet, no access to a bucket, or even a box. Their sewer system is running literally around their feet. In one particularly bad example, there is a community in India that has 60,000 people. For those 60,000 people, there are 10 toilets. And even here in the United States, there are 1,950,000 people, almost 2 million people in the United States of America, that do not have access to indoor toilets. It is no wonder that 80% of the sickness on earth comes from untreated wastewater. 80%. Out of every 10 people that are sick at any one time or are dying of sickness, a full 8 of them are sick because untreated wastewater has contaminated their drinking water. Truly, how fortunate we are that we have organized, paid for, and maintain a scientific approach to keeping our water clean. What a treat it is to have the Boise WaterShed to go meander around and check out how all of this miracle of water works. Not only are there great educational displays and wonderful whimsy, like the Pooh Pen desk organizer and the Can Man, there's also a lovely patio. On it is this wonderfully whimsical tree made of plumbing supplies. This tree is made of discarded pipes and faucets and everything else that has been left laying around the sewer treatment plants. Here, Tom demonstrates that, yes, the faucets do still open, but don't be waiting for any water. The Boise WaterShed patio also includes a lovely sculpture commemorating the efforts of so many who made all of this possible. Exploring the shed that celebrates the Boise WaterShed is truly a delight. Their hours are Monday through Friday, 9:30 to 4:30. For groups of 10 or more, they ask that you call for an appointment. 489-1284. You might also want to check out WaterShed Weekend. WaterShed Weekend is every third Saturday of the month between 10 o'clock in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. The WaterShed building is open for your enjoyment. One special feature of WaterShed Weekend is that at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, they have a tour of the plant. All you have to do is be there. Again, if you're a group of 10 or more, make sure you make a reservation. For more information on Boise WaterShed, please go to www.boiseenvironmentaleducation.org. The one thing that people usually make a mistake on when they're typing in this rather long www address is they forget to put in 2 E's between Boise and environmental. Just double make sure you do that. You can also get more information at 489-1284. The entire series of Pooh, You, and the Great Wahoo is now available on a 1 1/2 hour DVD. The DVD is divided into 13 different scene selections, so you can easily find what it is you are interested in. For information on ordering the DVD of Pooh, You, and the Great Wahoo, please contact me at beerdrinker@greatwahoo.com. Again, that is a 1 1/2 hour DVD divided into 13 scene selections, or, of course, you can watch the whole movie straight through. Information at beerdrinker@greatwahoo.com. Cindy Sue just couldn't stand it any longer. She'd been teaching Sunday school long enough and couldn't put up with trying to get the kids to pay attention. So she went to the elders of the church and told them how dedicated she was, but she couldn't stand it anymore. Get her into an adult Bible class if they want to keep her around. Well, it turns out they did want to keep her around. She was a good teacher. So they agreed. And finally, Cindy Sue was so happy to start teaching adults. One of Cindy Sue's great interests were the ancient kings and queens of Israel. There were about 20 of them between 900 and 700 BC, and she started teaching about them with relish. She went through the list from Jeroboam to Nadab to Zimri. She talked about Omri and Ahab and Hosea. She waxed on about Jehoahaz, and of course, she didn't leave out the queens. It was so pleasant finally sitting talking to adults, and she was feeling very pleased with herself. Cindy Sue thought that the discussion had gone really well. Just to top off a perfect day, she said, "Now, we have been talking about the kings and queens, but of course there is a higher power. Does anyone know what that is?" Her expectations of ending Bible study on a positive note were quickly reinforced when Mr. Andernet shot up his hand and said, "Oh, Cindy Sue, I know the answer to that one. That's an easy one. The higher power to kings and queens is aces." And that's this week's Beer Drinker's Guide to the Great Wahoo. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you next week. And in the meantime, keep celebrating the Great Wahoo!